Welcome, everybody, back to another edition of Take the Hill, which is a leadership podcast dedicated to illuminating the human experience of leadership. So, we are excited to have a special guest who we're going to be introducing here shortly today. But, Dennis and Angelo, welcome back.
Good morning. Good morning.
Fantastic. Great to have you here.
Happy to
So,
be here.
excellent. So, in her latest book, Margaret Wheatley wrote that several important questions are being asked of leaders today. Prominent, pretty much, she focuses around, who do you choose to be for this period of time? Are you willing to use whatever power and influence that you have to create, islands that evoke and rely upon best human qualities to create, relate, and persevere? And she further writes that leadership is an unshakable faith in people's capacity to be generous with their time, creative, and kind. And it's this commitment that create the conditions, for these capacities to blossom. And in that deep knowing that even within our most dire circumstances, more becomes possible as we engage others together with compassion as we kind of find our way forward. And from my perspective, our guest today has created a community that evokes our best human qualities to not only create, but develop relationships as a community and also persevere. So it is our pleasure to welcome to the show today Dr. Paul Hennigan. Thank you, Paul, for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation.
Well, it's fantastic. And we look forward to the conversation with you today. And for those of you who listeners have had not the opportunity to meet Paul, he is the current president of Point Park University, which he joined in the early 2000s, beginning as the vice president for finance and operations. Prior to Point Park, Dr. Hennigan was the chief financial officer for the city of Pittsburgh from 1994 to 1999, where you reported directly to the mayor. And you were responsible for the development and the execution of the city's operating capital budgets, as well as short term and long term financing. Right? You hold a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science from Edinburgh University, which is also my alma mater, a Master's of Public Administration from the University of Pittsburgh's Graduate School of Public and International Affairs, and a doctorate in education degree from the University of Pennsylvania. Hopefully, we got that correct
You
along
did.
the way. Fantastic. So, we're going to jump in kind of where we start with all of our guests. And we want to begin by asking you, what does leadership mean to you?
Well, leadership is a very important responsibility. And for me, I have a very simple definition. Most of my life is pretty simple. And my simple definition of leadership is the ability to inspire and motivate a group of people to go from point A to point B. And it's just that simple. And when I sometimes visit graduate level classes and I ask, what does leadership mean to you? Often I will get students who will talk about attributes of leadership and qualities of leadership, but are a little short on a definition. And so for me, it's a pretty straightforward, simple definition: the ability to inspire and motivate a group of people to go from point A to point B.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hennigan. And again, I want to welcome you and thank you for your time and for being on our show. But I want to ask the question, as you reflect upon your professional journey, would you share some significant moments that help define the leader you have become?
I There have been a lot of significant moments. As a matter of fact, now that I'm nearing the end of my time as president, I find myself going through a lot of flashbacks, which is interesting because I haven't had that experience in my life. And all of a sudden, I'll have this image. Um, One thing I will say, and I was fortunate early in my career, not long after my master's degree in my late 20s, I was working as a senior level staff person to a group of executives. And that was my first exposure to seeing firsthand leadership and learning about leadership. I had learned about leadership in the classroom as an undergraduate. I had learned about leadership in graduate school, but to actually watch leaders at work make decisions, participate in discussions, uh, do presentations, make speeches, show up at events. To watch leaders at work over the course of my career has been the best learning for me. And I would encourage any person who aspires to a role in leadership to pay very close attention to all of the leaders that you interact with or you watch on TV, because you can learn a lot, good things and bad things. And for me, as I thought about this, I've kind of put together a list of attributes that I've learned and have tried really hard um, to embrace and make a part of who I am as a leader. One is integrity. And for me, that just means say what you mean and mean what you say and be very, very clear. Just don't go around in circles. Truth and honesty are very important. You never have to weave any webs, and you never have to look over your shoulder wondering what you said. I've seen so many leaders get twisted in circles about things that they said that weren't necessarily true or honest, and it doesn't work. So those two, integrity, truth, and honesty. I'm also a big facts and data guy. Patrick mentioned at the beginning, I was a CFO for the city of Pittsburgh and also here at Point Park before I became president. Facts and data are critically important for leaders to make good decisions. And I have found that by gathering the facts and using the data, it helps to pave the way for better decisions. I've already mentioned simplicity. I had a boss who was a great leader in my late 20s, and he used to say all the time, keep it simple. And he was right. And you don't have to show everybody how much you know. Um, it's desirable not to show everybody how much you know, because then people get really bored really quickly. But keep it simple. People can understand simple concepts, and leaders who have the ability to take complex issues and boil them down into their simplest components are the ones that are generally able to inspire and motivate people to follow. Teamwork is also very important. And I know that sounds trite, but as leaders, we are the sum of our parts. And the higher a person rises in any organization, the more so that is true, because you just can't keep your finger on everything. And so you have to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, and you have to be confident enough to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. We are the sum of our parts. And then finally, and I think, Patrick, you mentioned this at the beginning, compassion and empathy are really important. Leaders have to treat people with respect, and leaders need to treat people the way they want to be treated. So for me, it's just a basic set of principles that I have followed my entire career.
Well, thank you. That one response, simplistic, really speaks to me, because in my prior life, before I got into education, I was a maintenance man. I always it was hilarious. People, when I was training somebody in how to fix machinery or do something, they would always start with the most complicated thing. Instead of, I would say, did you check to see if the start button works or if there's power? And they said, no, they would dig into this big complicated issue. And here it was just a simple solution to a problem. So I appreciate that. And it's so true with leadership as well.
Yeah, that's such a. You're right, and like you said, the more that you move up, and I'll just use the word the chain of command, so to speak, in more successively responsible positions, it's that idea where you don't have to use big words or these big complex ideas, because at the end of the day, as you mentioned, Dr. Hennigan, sometimes the simplest explanations or the directives are the clearest and the easiest to follow. And it keeps individuals moving forward. So my one quick follow-up question that you mentioned is how do you, as an individual, or what would you tell our students to be the best path to develop the courage to kind of always act with integrity or describe a situation as it is, rather than trying to, either lie or kind of get into the gray areas?
That's a really good question. Courage is tough to develop. And for me, it was watching other leaders make bad mistakes and seeing the negative effect and the negative impact that it had on those leaders. And I can remember early in my career seeing that. I worked in a political environment. This was even before the city. And I saw a lot of leaders make decisions based on political calculations instead of based on integrity or data and facts. And I watched those leaders make bad decisions and then get slapped around or twist in the wind. And I can remember as a young man and early in my career, thinking how painful that was for the leader. And if the leader had simply had the courage to do the right thing, make the right decision from the beginning, instead of all this political nuance and political calculation, the leader would not have got slapped around as badly. And so that, for me, is what formed the basis of my courage to make the best decisions possible, even the difficult ones. People will generally respect a good decision, a painful decision, if it's the right decision. But they won't respect bad decisions that are made for the wrong reasons.
Thank you for that follow-up question there. So since we're kind of in this neighborhood, what was one of your most challenging leadership moments? I promise an easy question after this.
Right. I should write a book on this. I'm going to use an example from Point Park. So it was early in my presidency. I've been president now for 15 years. So it was early in my presidency. I was a young man. I became president when I was 44 years old. And we had a board member who was bigger than life. He had a PhD in nuclear physics. He was a very generous donor to the university. And he was the smartest person in the room, no doubt about it. And he made sure that everybody knew he was the smartest person in the room. And so this was probably around 2007 or so. And we were just developing the concept for the academic village at Point Park University, which has become this 5-block living learning community in downtown Pittsburgh. And for some reason, this board member was adamant that he wanted a pedestrian bridge across the Boulevard of the Allies from what is our Lawrence Hall over to what is now the Village Park. And he was adamant about it, absolutely adamant about it. And he thought it would be cute for students to be able to walk in their slippers from Lawrence Hall across the street and take classes on the other side of the boulevard, which we were just beginning to develop. And I had explained to him on numerous occasions, he chaired the facilities committee of the board. I had explained to him on numerous occasions that I didn't agree with a pedestrian bridge and I would never support a pedestrian bridge. We were embracing the urban streetscape, the whole body of knowledge about revitalizing cities and how you want pedestrians on sidewalks, you don't want them inside buildings. We had embraced a design principle that we use to this day, which is large first floor windows to show folks what's going on inside the buildings, to share the energy of the university with the street. So it's all about the urban streetscape and putting the energy on the sidewalks as opposed to pedestrian bridges. And we had had this debate for probably a half a year. So we were in a board meeting, one of our quarterly board meetings, and this board member decided to put it on the table without my knowledge. And I call that an ambush. So I was sitting in the board meeting and here was this board member pontificating with the full board, and I didn't know it, about his advocacy for a pedestrian bridge across the boulevard. And I was sitting there stunned that this person would do that at a board meeting, a complete ambush at a board meeting. And this is all happening in real time. And there's a million thoughts going through my head. What do I do? How do I handle this? And I knew that I had to address the issue, because there was just no way that I could allow the board to head down this path that we as a university were not going to support, and that I did not support. And I knew I had to do it very respectfully. So he went on and on and on. And I said, thank you very much. I have to speak, and I need to be candid and honest. And I will let you know that here are the reasons why I cannot support a pedestrian bridge across the Boulevard of the Allies. That took a lot of courage, but I knew it was the right thing to do, because it wasn't going to be good for the school. We were going to get into a battle with the city of Pittsburgh that did not want a pedestrian bridge across the Boulevard of the Allies. And I said what I had to say succinctly and respectfully. And then he demanded a vote. And he lost. It was 2-1. And that was a really intense moment in my career as a new president, a new college president. I asked him out to lunch. A couple weeks later, we went out to lunch. As we were leaving the restaurant, he put his arm, he's an older man, he put his arm around me and said, "You're the boss. I'm getting in line and following you." So, and the relationship was great from that point on. But boy, I'll tell you, that was a really, really tense moment for me in a board meeting in front of 40 people.
Dr. Hennigan, that's an amazing experience to share with us and our listeners, and I appreciate you doing that. It's always cool to learn kind of inside the four walls what happens sometimes with leaders, especially. I appreciate it being part of the Point Park community and just kind of seeing how it goes. The guys here on the show, they do bring me on, though, to ask the really tough questions, and I'm totally fine with embracing that role. So, Dr. Hennigan, if you had to pick a song or a band that you listen to when you need some energy or motivation, what would it be?
Oh, you know what? I like so much music, and I like a wide span of music. So I'm a rock and roll guy from high school, and I could just go on and list the rock and roll bands that I listen to. I also like the British rock that came over to the United States in the 1980s. I'm a big fan. I still listen to all of that. So I could probably list, I don't know, 10 to 20. I don't have a one go-to, but I will tell you that when I'm looking for inspiration or even sometimes motivation, quiet reflection is key for me. Yeah, I'm more of a quiet, pensive, somewhat introverted, believe it or not, somewhat introverted. My Myers-Briggs shows up introversion. But yeah, I don't rely on music for motivation and inspiration. I rely on music for enjoyment.
When you're in those introspective moments of reflection, I'm sure it's dependent on what you've gone through in that day or maybe the climate you're currently in, but I mean, what do you focus on in those moments, or how do you take your life that seems to be on the surface very hectic and all over the place? How do you then reel that back in and just kind of be calm with yourself in that moment?
Yeah, it depends on what the issue is, but I try to sort things out. I'm a sorter. My mind works like a spreadsheet. So I'm putting everything in columns, rows and columns, and sorting things out and trying to do the analysis in my mind. I also write. So when I need to, when it's all swirling around in my head, it sometimes it will bug me till the end of time. And so what I've learned is to sit down and write it out. And when I write it out and I get it out of here, it clears the head, and then I'm not ruminating anymore or perseverating anymore. So for me, writing is very, very helpful. Getting it out of my head and on paper, because then it helps me do a better job of organizing. When it's in my head and I'm just swirling around and ruminating, then I can't sleep and I can't focus on anything else. When I get it on paper, then I know it's on paper. Then when I'm done, I'll go listen to Bruce Springsteen, U2, Depeche Mode.
That's awesome, because we weren't going to let you off the hook that easily.
I got it all.
Fantastic.
Well, that kind of helps me because sometimes I have things going through my head and I never really thought about just writing it down and get it out of there. But I'm going to try that.
Well, it was a tip that I learned years ago, and I've done it ever since. And I pass it on to as many people as I can. My wife, my children, same thing. Quit swirling. Just write it down. It does help. It helps clear the head.
That's interesting. You brought up another thing that was kind of interesting to me, that you're an introvert, and I teach a course that most people think introverts they don't make good leaders, and I've tried to teach this in the contrary, that introverts are very good leaders actually, but I find that you said that when you were meeting with that one board member, you had to find the courage. So as an introvert, that had to be hard to get that courage to challenge them or to speak your piece. But in asking another question, what other skill sets become valuable as you take on increasingly challenging leadership roles?
I would say that in addition to the courage, the ability to push oneself forward. And that's what helps me to overcome my introversion. So I can walk into a reception with 50 people and feel incredibly uncomfortable about having to work the room as a leader. But I force myself to do my job and work the room as a leader. And when I'm finished, I usually feel a lot better because I did my job. But when I walk in and, there's 50 people and I know I've got to work the room, I get the butterflies. When I have to walk in front of 1,000 people and give a speech or a presentation, whatever it may be, always have the butterflies. And I think to myself quietly, wherever I am, why do I put myself in these places? Like, why do I do this? Because I get the same feeling all the time. And I just force myself. I have to push myself. So the developed skill of pushing oneself, and I mean really pushing oneself, I have to just find it within me to push myself into that room or onto the stage and do what I need to do.
And that brings up another idea that the complete opposite for extroverts. Maybe they need to take the time and push themselves to maybe slow down a little bit and not be so, how do you want to put it?
Gregarious.
Yeah. And so we could use that for both sides. So that's interesting.
Yeah. I enjoy watching extroverts sometimes, as long as they have a good balance and, they've got a good compass. But I'm amazed when I watch extroverts work a room and, the life of the party and a million stories and, everybody's slapping everybody on the back. I'm amazed at that. It's not me. It's never been me. It's just, and it probably never will be me, but introverts can be good leaders.
Yes.
And I think that's an important fact because, like you said, in the world, there's introverts and extroverts, and it's really seeking that balance. But I think at the end of the day, like you said, if you are a little bit more of a reserved or introverted type individual, it's not going to preclude you or limit your ability to move into leadership roles. And like you said, I think you're a testament to that. And you could see that being exemplified in just the words that you had spoken, as well as your actions within the community. So,
thank you.
And one last thing on that topic as well. I think it's good to have that kind of dynamic in a leader because not everybody who you lead is going to be an extrovert, right? There may be some who are introverted as well. And so having somebody who can, relate to that experience as well might bring a team together. But Dr. Hennigan, I'm really excited to ask you this question. It revolves around change, and I feel like change is something I personally had to teach myself to be okay with after graduating from my undergrad and moving into my professional career. And that feeling still feels so fresh to me now that I am working with students who they're in the same place I was not too long ago. So I do see a lot of students worry about change, whether it is the change of becoming a young adult, entering college, or in like the blink of an eye. Flash forward 4 years, they're then changing again to graduating and becoming a young professional. Lots of change, right? So you, Dr. Hennigan, are now entering a new phase and chapter of your own life. How are you feeling about all this change? And what advice would you give to students on approaching the inevitable changes they too will experience throughout life?
Yeah, good question. So all of the research shows that the overwhelming majority of people do not like change, would prefer to avoid change. And that is because of the uncertainty on the other side of the change. And there's an attribute